Hey everyone, separation anxiety. It's the topic of today's conversation. And if you have a dog that suffers from separation anxiety, you're going to want to stick around and watch this and get some great information. For those of you who are not sure what separation anxiety is, it's actually defined as a condition that when a dog becomes distressed and anxious and exhibits certain behaviors whenever their human is separated from them. We have Malena DiMartini. She is a leading expert in separation anxiety. She has devoted her career of over 20 years in helping people and their dogs that suffer from separation anxiety. She's written 2 books on the topic, and she is here today, and we are so excited to have her. Malena, let's get you in. Hi, Malena. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, hello. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is such an important topic. I hear all the time about dogs that suffer from separation anxiety, and it can really be dangerous for the pet as well as for the household in general. So I'm really excited to dig in on this. So what I would love to do first is just if you can explain to people what's the difference between a dog that, shows behaviors that they miss their human when they leave versus those dogs that actually suffer from separation anxiety.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great question because we have to remember that dogs are very social animals. So a lot of dogs are going to miss their owners, their pet parents and their guardians. But missing them is very different than showing signs of extreme distress. And as you mentioned when we opened up the conversation, separation anxiety is this extreme anxiety and distress that the dog displays when separated from their humans or human. And it's more akin to a phobia, really, a phobia about being alone. And by definition, phobias are pretty irrational to those that are not experiencing them, but very, very real to those that are, such as these dogs.
So what kind of behaviors do dogs exhibit? I mean, I own a pet store, so I hear these stories all the time. And I've heard about dogs jumping out of windows of houses. Like, it's really dangerous. So can you maybe explain, there might be some new pet parents that don't know what's going on, that may not be able to identify what's happening with their dog. So can you maybe explain some of the behaviors that one might see with a dog that is going through separation anxiety?
Sure. Now, the top 3 that are typically discussed and also very commonly researched are vocalization, destruction, and elimination. So urinating or defecating in the house when alone. So we have to make sure we have that distinction, that that they're properly house trained.
Right, and that they've been let out to go potty before you leave. This would be different. Yeah.
Exactly. So those are the 3 most commonly reported symptoms. Now, it's interesting because now in this day and age that we have the technology access that we have, we can really watch live and or record our dogs when alone, even if just for brief periods. And so sometimes dogs aren't destructive, but they will pace and pant and whine and drool and tremble. So even those types of indicators are really important to watch for. The reason those 3, the vocalization, destruction, and elimination, are the most commonly reported is that those are the indicators that are most impactful to the pet parents, right? If the neighbors are complaining about vocalization, or you're coming home to lots of destruction, or you're coming home to urine or feces on the carpet, those are really destructive to your average pet guardian. But, just a dog that's drooling and pacing may not be evidenced very well without having an eye on that dog.
Well, and as a nutritionist, I look at the overall lifestyle and well-being of a dog. And so you're right, the human may not necessarily see, the impact right away, but long-term, that stress is going to manifest in a variety of ways that may even be sickness and, dis-ease, right? So I think that's a great point that Sometimes you can't look for the obvious factors. You need to look for some of the more subtle cues. And if you're connected with your dog, which I know we all are because we love them so much, you'll understand those subtle differences. And having those cameras, if you suspect that it's an issue, probably would be extremely helpful when you decide what your plan is to help your dog. So with that, before we get into how to help your dog, just out of curiosity, has there been anything identified regarding what causes separation anxiety in dogs?
It's such a big topic. Separation anxiety has been the #1 most researched behavior issue for the past 4 decades, above aggression, believe it or not. And so we have a lot of interesting research and literature. Unfortunately, with all of that, the etiology and the actual causation remains a little bit obscure. Now, we know a lot about what does not cause separation anxiety. And good news for any pet parents out there, this is not a result of you spoiling your dog or letting him sleep in bed with you or giving him all sorts of treats or anything like that. We know that very, very clearly, and those studies have been replicated over and over. But insofar as exactly what the cause is, we know some things that are very commonly correlated as precipitating events. But the biggest indicator that they're currently researching is a genetic predisposition. And they've actually discovered, I'm not a geneticist, by the way, a haplotype that is indicative of the potential or the likelihood that a dog will have separation anxiety. So that's like a haplotype is like a genetic marker to sort of for simplification purposes.
So I'm not a geneticist either, but
Good.
I love that aspect of it because I would have never thought of that, you know. And again, I think sometimes we want to so easily put things and define them and put them in a box. And that's not really the way it works, especially with dogs, because though they talk to us, they don't speak in English, right? So it's a little bit harder to communicate with them. But I kind of feel like there's a lot of layering. Even in my own practice as a clinical pet nutritionist, you know, I see a lot of people that, you're right, they have dogs, but if they're feeding foods that may, you know, have lots of preservatives or food dyes, I'm not saying that that's the causation of separation anxiety, but it definitely could lean into something, especially if there is this predisposition of a genetic, I don't know if you would call it a malfunction. I don't know what you would call that because I'm not a geneticist, but something that is a little bit off. But not to steal the show and talk about nutrition, because I really want to help our pet parents that have these issues going on. So,
well, I do think one thing that you said though is really important. Think about it this way. From even looking at nutrition or general well-being, there are a lot of people who, if they went running through a hay field, would start to sneeze and sneeze and sneeze and sneeze. And there's others that would not be affected by that whatsoever. But the important thing to remember is that just because something is genetically predisposed, that doesn't mean that it can't be modified. Because people hear genetics and they say, well, my dog was born with it, I guess there's nothing I can do. And I want to make sure no one starts to think in that way.
That's such a really important distinction, and I thank you for making that, because, you know, we're all predisposed to a few things. It doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be the road of our future, right? We can make modifications. So I think that's great, and I think that's why a lot of people, you know, they try to handle it on their own. And so I'm going to ask you a 2-part question. A, is it something that pet parents should handle on their own? And then B, which is what I think, is would it be better? And when I say better, I mean, would it be better for the animal, not necessarily for the pet parent, to have someone that is a third party with perspective to be able to come in and help guide someone through this process? Because patience is going to be key. So it's not like you're going to be hurrying it up or, you know, making it happen quickly. This is going to be a long, ongoing process that you probably have to deal with for the rest of your life. But so first, can people do it on their own? And secondly, you know, what can a trainer do that will help?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because while I do think there is a certain level of individual or quality of individuals that are just, keeners, as we call them, right? They're keen to get all the right information and they really know how to implement it. But, some people can read a book about how to build an airplane and the rest of us have to fly United Airlines, right? And so it's just that simple. And the thing with working with separation anxiety, it's a very, very complex behavior with some rather nuanced treatment processes. And so doing it on your own, while not impossible, may lead to a less efficient and less effective outcome. And, if it takes you 6 months, 12 months, to be able to leave your dog home alone for 4 or 5 hours, with working with a trainer, well, gosh, let's just double that if you're going to work on it on your own, because you won't know all the subtleties that need to be incorporated. And I want to just make a quick note to the fact that oftentimes people hear me say, is it going to take 6 months or 12 months? And every dog is an individual, right? So some dogs will get through this protocol very quickly. Some will take much longer. I urge people to not try and focus on the number of days, weeks, months, etc., but to, to really sort of think in terms of this is a journey, and we have to take it at the pace that the dog is able to handle. So thinking in terms of months, not weeks, nor thinking in terms of many, many years, I think is the best way to look at it.
And it's interesting because I feel like we as humans, we love to project things onto our dogs, which is why we put them in cute dresses and, all of those fun things, which I do myself. So, I'm guilty as charged. But one of the things that we don't think of, is if you as a human have anxiety, if you think you can't get on a plane, just to go with that analogy, right? You're not going to, quote, be cured. You're not going to one day have so much anxiety to get on that plane and then the next day or the day after or 6 months later go on there and have no anxiety. So I think that's a really important distinction for you to make, is that you have to work at the pace and with the individual dog in front of you.
That's
some
right.
Dogs may pick up faster, some dogs it may take longer, but if they're your life family member, right, hopefully as long as they can be, right, they're worth every second of it. It's worth every second to help them to decompress and de-stress. And it really shouldn't be clocking in and saying this is taking too long or this isn't going fast enough, because however anxious you're feeling about your dog, they're feeling it 10 times more. And your anxiety is actually exacerbating their problem, right?
It's so important that you say that about, thinking about the welfare really of the animal. And I want to remind people, while this is a long process, it is temporary with respect to the, 15 or more years that you'll be hopefully enjoying the company of your dog.
Absolutely. So what does the process for you as a trainer, what does your process look like? Say I were to hire you because one of my dogs has separation anxiety. What is that? What does it look like? How do you begin the process of working with the dog with separation anxiety? I know you can't go through a step-by-step. We're going to have people reach out to you if they need more, but if you can do like an overview, so those people at least that maybe have dogs with separation anxiety can find a silver lining and, some glimmer of hope, it would be great.
So I'm going to explain how we particularly work with separation anxiety. And when I say we, that would be me and all of the certified separation anxiety trainers that I work with. But I also will take a moment to explain just a little bit of a brushstroke overview of what the process looks like. So the way we work with separation anxiety is we ask our clients to commit to a minimum of 4 weeks. And we are very, very, very clear about the fact that in 4 weeks, the dog is not likely, if even possible, to get through their separation anxiety. But that's our starting point, and that's where we start to build a really solid foundation. We meet with our clients usually using Zoom or some other online technology one time every week. But the other sort of 4 or 5 days a week, we ask for 2 days off. And the other 4 or 5 days a week, we actually collaborate using a shared document where...
Hold on 1 second. So 2 days off. you're saying that you're giving the dog 2 days off from working?
From working, but that doesn't mean they can be left alone.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify.
Good,
Okay.
good
Please
question.
continue.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes. So folks, so 2 days off, it can be whatever days that works into that individual's schedule. And during the other 5 days of the week, there will be very concerted training plans that the client will be executing. Good news about that is it takes about 20 to 30 minutes a day of training. And we, as CSATs and myself, we write out literally, Simon says, step by step, this is what you're exactly going to do in the course of this 20 to 30 minutes. And when I mentioned that we collaborate in our notes, when the client does that 20 to 30 minutes of what we call missions, your mission for the day, they write their notes as to their observations with regard to what their dog was experiencing and displaying when they did that training. And based on those notes, we write the very next day worth of training exercises. We write that next mission. So it's actually, we work with our clients very, very closely, literally every day minus those 2 days a week. And so insofar as the sort of brushstroke overview, this is actually a process that most people are quite familiar with. It's nothing new in the sense, I sure didn't make it up. It's called systematic desensitization, and it was developed in the 1950s by a lot of very, very smart scientists and others. And it has been used since that time for helping human beings with fears and phobias. The difference in the application with dogs is we don't have language. And so we base a lot of the execution of the training on reading the dog's body language. But the basics of it is that we have to expose the dog in the tiniest of increments to that which they have some fear of. Okay. And when we say we expose them only at a level that does not incite that fear. So if
It's
the
not
dog,
escalation, right?
Yeah. So if the dog is afraid, if you leave for 15 minutes, we're not leaving for 15 minutes. For many, we start out with just a few seconds, even milliseconds, and then we build upon that over time.
I love that. So systematic desensitization is something that I'm very familiar with, and I implore all of our viewers, if you're not, please look that up if you have a dog with specifically with separation anxiety, but with other things as well. I think other behaviors, dogs that are aggressive or reactive on leash, that also is a really great thing to incorporate. So dogs being creatures of habit, right? Do you think, or not think, do you know, you're the expert, so you tell me, is routine better for a dog with separation anxiety, or does that almost set them up to fail because then they're so looking forward to very specific steps that if something is out of whack, they go into a tailspin?
You're so smart. I'm so glad you asked this question. Here's the amazing thing. The answer to that question is kind of, sort of, yes, both. And what I mean by that, dogs are masters of discrimination, okay? And what that indicates is, I mean, how many of you know that that your dog reacts differently when you put on your tennis shoes or hiking boots to go for a walk with the dog versus when you put on the shoes that you're going to wear to a business meeting? The dog's like, oh yeah, I'm not going probably. Right? So dogs.
It's so true.
Isn't that true? I mean, gosh, they're amazing. And the only availability for dogs insofar as communication or understanding is watching the environment. So they know differences like which shoes you're wearing and things like that. Now, in order for dogs to feel safe and secure in their environment, in their lives, there is an element of predictability that needs to exist. But predictability doesn't have to be routine. And I know that sounds contraindicated there, contrary there, but what I mean by that is, if I teach a dog in the early stages, let's say, of a separation anxiety protocol, that when I walk out the door and count 1,000, 2, 1,000, I'm going to come back in. And that was not scary. And if the dog knows that when I grab my keys, I also go out the door and count 1,000, 2, 1,000, then the keys no longer predict something scary. They predict something safe. So all of these predictive abilities that they have by looking at specific signals that we use in our everyday lives help them to know what's coming next. So that part is important. The part that is commonly an error is I always walk out the door at 10 a.m. or I always do this one thing prior to leaving, and then leaving for durations that are too long for the dog to handle. And so and as you mentioned in the question, if your routine is so regimented that the dog says, well, wait a second, it's not 10 a.m., it's 4:30 in the afternoon, this is not okay with me. And so that's why we have to incorporate some randomization and variability so that things that are out of routine become positive predictors of these safe absences.
Yeah. So on that note, let's just say that someone doesn't have the financial ability to work with a trainer and they have to take it on their own. I think you've just given some really great introductory information. Maybe it's something that people can start on their own, get a little progress, and then maybe if they can save up some money, work with a trainer to really kind of get the dogs over the hump. But is there anything that a pet parent should not do before leaving the home for a dog that has separation anxiety?
So we have to remember that any dog that is suffering with separation anxiety is terrified of being alone. And so putting them in the position that they're rehearsing alone time day in and day out is actually, we make these dogs into professional worriers because they're rehearsing essentially their fears daily. So any absence that's going to be beyond what the dog is able to comfortably handle is going to be, for a temporary amount of time during training, is going to be suspended. We're going to manage those absences. And people often say to me, oh my gosh, that's impossible. And I would disagree with that. We are only limited by a bit of creativity. I mean, in this day and age, right, we've got nextdoor.com. We've got, we can communicate with all of our neighbors. We've got, people at the local college that would be thrilled to get a quiet place to study with Wi-Fi and a couple of goodies in your refrigerator, right? There are so many resources to have people help to watch the dog in the situations that would be beyond their capacity.
Those would be extreme situations, right?
And those would be extreme situations, of course. Now, and the other and probably more important thing, people very, very commonly will call or write or whatever and say, got this complaint note from my neighbors. I've got to have the dog stop barking because, I'm going to get a fine or what have you, or the landlord or whomever. And so they think I've got to just stop the barking. And the most common, recommendation, unfortunately, to stop the barking is to use an aversive advice like an e-collar, shock collar, stim collar. And I just want to urge people to really understand that a dog that is going through this is terrified, and thereby we're adding to that terror if we use something that is, giving them a shock or similar.
I mean, and technically you're solving a symptom. You're fixing a symptom.
Absolutely.
You're not fixing the underlying issue. And in most cases, you're making it worse. So yeah, my God, I hear that in such a sincere way. So one of the things that you just said that right now just went out of my brain for some odd reason, because I just felt so bad for the dog in the barking collar that has the anxiety. Is it something where even for those pet parents, when they're starting on those milliseconds, You know, I am a big fan of using long-term chews. I mean, Bow Wow Labs is all about long-term chews and how great they are for mental stimulation, how they release serotonin and dopamine in a natural way. I mean, is that something that you can, if you can engage the dog's brain in like a frozen treat puzzle or with, you know, something similar that you can then leave, even if it's only for a millisecond, to get them to begin pairing something, I'm okay, and here's something happy with your absence. Is that something that you would recommend?
You know, it's amazing because you may laugh at this, but I would actually strongly discourage that use.
Okay. Okay.
But let
Tell
me
me
make this.
why.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Let me make a big caveat here. I am the person that shouts from the mountaintops that we should be providing positive enrichment for our dogs. I'm also the person that shouts from the mountaintops about the fact that food is one of the most efficient and effective means of acquiring behavior. And so it's surprising for many when I say, well, wait a second, let's not give them that frozen stuffed toy and then leave. But there's three reasons why that causes a problem. The first, we go back to what we were talking about regarding predictive elements. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I give you this red ball that's filled with some yummy stuff, I hand it to you, and what follows me giving you that item is me exiting, which is something that you're very scared of. Right. You are going to learn pretty quickly and make a pretty fast association that red ball with food in it equals bad thing.
Well, but the caveat should have been that you would integrate that. You wouldn't just give that before you leave. You would do that at random parts throughout the day. But I 100% hear what you're saying, that if you create a routine, then they are going to respond
Right.
with distress and anxiety because they're anticipating what's coming next.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's important that even if you're giving it at other times of the day, I personally would not start with giving an interactive feeding toy to a dog as a predictor of leaving, not just because of the potential of them anticipating that, oh, this means that, but also because one of the most crucial aspects of working with a separation anxiety dog is for us to be able to very carefully observe their body language and determine at what point in time, whether it's a millisecond or 5 minutes, are they starting to show signs of discomfort. We don't want to let them go all the way to distress and freaking out, but where are they starting to show discomfort? And it's very, very hard, if not almost impossible, for those, by the way, that will eat, because many separation anxiety dogs would never touch a T-bone steak sitting in the middle of the living room. So, it doesn't even matter for those. But for those that will engage in food, and I mean, you guys are Bow Wow Labs, just thinking of, endless stomachs like the Labradors have, they probably would. But it serves as a distraction. And for that first, whatever minute or 5 minutes or however long may be happening surrounding the distress that is happening. And I worry, and I've got some brilliant video about this that shows this. Many of these dogs are experiencing rather conflicting motivation, right? They're like, I gotta eat, but I'm really stressed about what just happened. Yeah. And what we want to see is, what does the dog do? Because when they run out of that food toy, all bets are off.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think, a lot of people default to what they know, and what they know is that my dog loves food and that's going to distract them. So how do you feel about crates with dogs that suffer from separation anxiety? Do you feel like that's a great tool, or do you feel like, again, it's up to the individual dog?
It's very, very individualistic. And I think, having a dog comfortable with crate confinement or some sort of confinement is important for reasons outside of separation anxiety. Your dog will have to go to the vet someday, or needs to be confined in the car for safety or something like that. It's very interesting to me how unbelievably comorbid crate confinement anxiety is with separation anxiety. And I don't know if this is the best example, but if someone were having a panic attack, I think we would only exacerbate it if we put them in the closet, right? I don't even if the closet was big.
It's a really good analogy. Yes.
And so for a lot of dogs, even those dogs that sleep in their crate, love their crate, the combination of the confinement with being left alone is far worse than being outside of the crate. So I think it's very individualistic to the dog, but I think it's well worth assessing how the dog does when in the crate, when left alone, and how the dog does when out of the crate, when left alone. And if it's same, better, different, worse, whatever, we want to make sure that we go forward with the environment and situation where the dog is the most comfortable.
I think what I am hearing through all of this is that if you have a dog with separation anxiety, get a reliable trainer, get someone that knows what they're doing, get someone that is experienced in separation anxiety specifically, because it does seem like such it's such a specific training, right, that you have to go through, and there's so many nuances that I'm sure that most people wouldn't even think of. They're not going to find them all on the internet because you can't put all of your experience on the internet as a trainer. And there is going to be those fine details that are going to be so beneficial to your dog and maybe be the difference between setting them up for success versus setting them up to fail. So if you had one or two things that you could tell any pet parent with a dog with separation anxiety, what would you want them to know?
I think what I distill it down to always are my two sort of burning passions that people know. And the first is a result of the many, many, many hundreds of clients with separation anxiety dogs that I have spoken to over the past 20 plus years, and how many of them have cried on the other end of the phone in our first phone call saying, I've broken my dog. I hurt, my dog, it's all my fault. And I want people to know and kind of harken back to a little bit of our genetic predisposition discussion and all of that. It is not your fault. People have to absolve themselves of the guilt that they are experiencing, thinking that somehow they have, given separation anxiety to their dog. So I think that's the first one. But the second is that I really want people to hear and understand that separation anxiety is indeed fixable. You hear so many people say, oh, yuck, your dog has separation anxiety. Oh, there's nothing you can do about that one. And even dog professionals shy away from separation anxiety sometimes. And so I just want people to know, yes, there is hope. This is an issue that can be worked on and resolved. It's slow, but it can be done. So don't just feel like, well, I guess this is my dog's lot in life, because that's not true.
Well, and to that note, we had one of our viewers has a dog named Clara that has been working with one of your behaviorists, Ingrid, who said that she was a pre-zero dog and that she is now a 4 out of 5 in calmness. So, and that's after 5 weeks. So it just goes to show that if you have patience and if you do the work, then your dog is going to reap all the benefits. So, Malena, thank you so much for coming. How can people find you if they want to learn more about you and potentially utilize your services?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, which is malenadimartini.com. MalenADemartini. I also want to let people know that we have an online self-paced course that is originally created for the average pet parent that says, maybe I can't hire a trainer full-time to help me with this. And so, from a cost perspective, it's much, much more economically friendly, but from an information perspective, it is everything that people really, really need to understand. As I mentioned, it's a self-paced course with lifetime access. And I actually made a discount code for any of your listeners and audience.
Awesome.
So anyone that is interested in taking a peek at our Mission Possible course, the discount code for that course is BowWowSA. So SA as in separation anxiety.
Well, thank you for doing that for all of our viewers, and thank you for coming. We really appreciate you, and I have a feeling that we might want to have you back because we're getting a lot of questions that we just don't have the time to answer right now, but I think if we can have you back, that'd be great.
I'd love it.
Awesome. And for all of you that have been watching and waiting, we are doing our own discount code today. It is Dog Day 2021. So if you go to bowwowlabs.com, enter in Dog Day 2021, you're going to get 20% off all of our products, excluding bully sticks. And that code is going to be good until Sunday, August 29th at midnight. Thank you all again. I appreciate it. And until next time, have a good day.